Welcome to Videocast 9 of Musicuentos Black Box Podcast. Musicuentos Black Box Podcast is a collection of media resources intended to form an easy-to-access bridge between high-quality second language acquisition research and teacher practice in the world language classroom. It is co-sponsored by Musicuentos.com and Indwelling Language. This episode was developed and is presented by me, Elliot Goodman, teacher, language lover, research wonk, and educator community developer at teacherspayteachers.com. Before I say what the topic of this episode is, let's talk about Oktoberfest for a second. Say you're an American traveler looking to buy a world-famous pork sausage. You look at the signs of the various stands until you see a picture of sausage. You walk up and the person in front of you orders.
Grüß Gott, eine Weißwurst mit Senf bitte.
You see the clerk working the stand grab one piece of sausage, slather it with mustard, collect €5, and hand it off. Now it's your turn. You try to read the sign and repeat what you just heard. Ein Weibwurst mit Senf, bitte. The clerk points to the sausage.
Weißwurst?
And you repeat with a nod. Weißwurst. The clerk smiles and points to a pretzel.
Weißwurst und Brezel?
So you look at the mustard container and read Senf. Weißwurst mit Senf?
Ah, Weißwurst mit Senf. Ja.
You pay for your sausage and mustard and walk away repeating to yourself, Weißwurst mit Senf. Weißwurst mit Senf. You wonder how anything can be so delicious, and why she pronounced pretzel with a B. In the end, you took away a little German. In this language learning experience, meaning was primary, there was a communicative goal that you were working toward, the activity could be easily measured by its outcome, there were opportunities for error correction, you focused on the grammar and pronunciation, and there was a clear connection to the real world. The topic of this episode is task-based language teaching, or TBLT for short. From that example, it's easy to see how TBLT can appear apt for transactional language. Through tasks, language learners can also learn to tell stories, share their opinions and emotions, discuss mergers and acquisitions, analyze poetry, or write literature. First, I'll give some background so we can understand where TBLT comes from, and then we'll delve into the main question. What is a task? You might recall the first Musicuentos Black Box video, in which Sarah Elizabeth discussed Michael H. Long's Methodological Principles for Language Teaching from 2011. His first two methodological principles are use task, not text, as the unit of analysis, and promote learning by doing. So what's a unit of analysis? Well, every syllabus needs some unit around which to organize lessons and teaching materials. Teachers can break down language into grammatical components, or thematic vocab. These are synthetic syllabi, because the students need to take the explicit knowledge about language and synthesize it themselves. Teachers can also approach creating a syllabus after asking their students what they want to be able to do with the target language. The teacher then plans activities for the students to use whole chunks of language in incrementally more complex ways, creating an analytic syllabus. That's just a quick summary for a refresher. For more about synthetic and analytic syllabi, check out Sarah Elizabeth's first Musicuentos Black Box video here. You may recognize the term focus on forms, which refers to how synthetic syllabi are organized around different grammatical forms. There are two types of analytic syllabi, focus on form and focus on meaning. Here we have the three main families of approaches. Focus on forms includes methods like grammar translation and TPR, which are organized around grammatical concepts or corpora of vocabulary words. Focus on meaning includes immersion and the natural approach, in which there is no explicit discussion of grammar, only the goal of communicating meaning. Focus on form is the happy medium. Lessons focus most on communicating some meaning, but when there is a problem with comprehension or production, then the student's attention needs to be drawn to particular linguistic elements such as grammar or vocab. You get the grammar instruction from a focus on forms approach heavily embedded in context, and only when a student notices a linguistic gap they need to fill, meaning an error they need to correct. You also get the focus on meaning at the forefront, because whatever is happening in the classroom requires the student to convey some meaning to accomplish a task. When you add on the approach of designing a syllabus by looking at what the student will need to do with the language and planning backwards, you find that task-based language learning is a focus on form approach with an analytic syllabus design. But all this is theoretical. Let's turn to our main question for the video. What is a task? TBLT starts with a needs analysis where the learners identify what kinds of tasks they will need to accomplish with the language. For example, in one real TBLT class in the Netherlands, the learners were predominantly parents who wanted to learn all the Dutch necessary to enroll their students in the local school. These real-world activities are examples of target tasks. There are two types of tasks, pedagogical tasks and target tasks. First, you have to identify the target task. Why is this student learning this language? What do they want to do with this language in the real world? Do they want to learn German so they can design BMWs in the Munich office? Does the student want to go to medical school in China and so they chose Mandarin? Are they studying ancient Greek so they can read and debate philosophy? Or are they parents looking to enroll their students in school in the Netherlands? These questions are important because a task-based syllabus requires an endpoint. Ideally, you should be able to measure at the end of the class how well a student can perform their target tasks. So that's where the student is going, their final destination. But what about where they're coming from and how to actually get them to their target? This is where it gets fun. In addition to target tasks, you have pedagogical tasks which take the student from their current language ability along a continuum towards their target task. You, the teacher, get to plan those pedagogical tasks. And you have to, because there aren't too many task-based textbooks yet. Students need to focus on meaning to succeed at accomplishing a pedagogical task. But when communication breaks down, they will naturally notice a linguistic gap, which provides you, the teacher, or their peers, opportunities to provide targeted, focus-on-form feedback so the student can close the linguistic gap and progress in their language learning. That's a lot about the theoretical framework of TBLT in very general terms. Now let's look at two examples of pedagogical tasks, jigsaw and information gap. As I briefly describe each of these, think about your own classroom and how you could design an activity for your students. Feel free to pause the video and describe your idea below in the comments. Be sure to say what language or languages you teach and the level of your students. In a jigsaw activity, multiple participants each learn something different that they must teach each other in order to accomplish a goal. A straightforward example is when 5 students each read one paragraph from a 5-paragraph story. Their task is to come together, put the 5 paragraphs in order, and explain why one part follows another, entirely in the target language. A more game-oriented example might involve students solving a logic puzzle or a murder mystery combining different clues. Students could also learn about different periods in history independently and then work together to describe how the different periods affected one another. Jigsaw activities mirror real-world scenarios where people represent different viewpoints or experiences and come together to solve a problem. In an information gap task, one interlocutor has more information that the other needs to solve a problem. When one student pretends to be a waiter and take another student's order in a restaurant, the first student needs the information to know what type of food to bring to the table. Similarly, fake doctor's office scripts or biographical interviews provide opportunities for one student to ask for information, get that information from another student, and then take some course of action appropriate to that information. You can make two-way information gap activities where students have to check in with each other. One way to do this is to have students sit back to back, each with a similar yet slightly different picture. They have to take turns describing the picture to each other and determine whether the pictures are the same, and if not, how they're different. These activities might translate into scenarios for business people who are learning about different marketing campaigns, or students describing different interpretations of a literary text. Got any ideas so far? Press pause, jot them down in the comments, and then keep going. How do these tasks help students learn a new language? Well, you can introduce new vocab and grammar in highly contextualized ways so the students can hear or read the input in a comprehensible way. A teacher can model the task and then allow students to play with the language on their own. In order to accomplish both the jigsaw and the information gap tasks, the students must focus on meaning in order to accomplish the communicative goal of sharing the information. When their partner doesn't understand and the intended outcome is not achieved, the speaker, and optionally with help from the teacher, can assess whether their own linguistic gap is based on meaning, i.e., not knowing what a word means, or if there's a form that needs to be addressed. The teacher or a more proficient learner can then provide the feedback to focus on the form and close the linguistic gap. Over time, these pedagogical tasks will look less like classroom activities, and the language will mirror more authentic language use, cementing its relationship with a real-world target task. This has just been a taste of TBLT. If I've done my job, you've got a good basis, but lots of questions. What other types of tasks are there? How do I find out what my students' target tasks are? How do I create a scope and sequence of pedagogical tasks to take students from day one all the way to their desired goals? How do I give students choice in their language learning? If I do incorporate student choice into developing language tasks, are they actually more motivated? Will they even acquire more language skills? Fortunately, the next video in the Musicuentos Black Box series addresses these last two questions. so stay tuned for Sarah Elizabeth's video coming out shortly. This has been a presentation of the Musicuentos Black Box Podcast, a collection of media resources intended to form an easy-to-access, easy-to-understand bridge between second language acquisition research and teacher practice in the world language classroom. For more information about the Musicuentos Black Box Podcast collection of resources, including ways you can help keep this resource available to teachers everywhere, visit musicuentos.com/blackbox.